The Galactic Empire ruled with cold efficiency, a machine of order that tolerated no deviation, no threat. Among the thousands of species under its dominion, only one caused unease, not because of power, not because of numbers, but because of potential. Humanity was a problem the Empire could not predict, could not control, and ultimately could not tolerate. Their ingenuity, their adaptability, and their chaotic defiance terrified the Council of Dominance. Quiet discussions turned to formal debates, and soon to cold, strategic calculation, preemptive annihilation. A solution dressed in the language of order and necessity. A unanimous vote was cast to eradicate Earth and all its scattered colonies before the humans could mature into something the galaxy might never survive. The operation commenced with precision. Planetary shields fell within hours as coordinated orbital strikes rained devastation upon Earth's surface. Massive kinetic weapons, bioengineered viral clouds, and seismic destabilization torpedoes reduced entire continents to smoldering wastelands. Cities, defenses, communication networks, each targeted with merciless accuracy. Humanity's last standing fleets, valiant and desperate, were obliterated before they could mount meaningful resistance. Billions died within days. The Empire did not stop to witness the slow collapse. They ensured nothing to grow from the ashes. Planetary blockades encircled Earth. Satellites scoured the surface, and biological purges continued for years, eliminating the scattered survivors like vermin. The official record declared total extinction. The Empire's broadcasts were filled with the triumph of their flawless operation, announcing to the galaxy that the human anomaly had been corrected. In the silence that followed, the galaxy adjusted. Trade resumed, borders expanded, and other species briefly celebrated the removal of the unpredictable Deathworlders. The Empire's grip tightened, its authority reaffirmed. Yet deep in forgotten places, beyond the scanning ranges of Imperial probes, human life persisted. They were not the soldiers or leaders of their fallen world. They were the overlooked, the insignificant, miners in asteroid belts, colonists on barely charted moons, scavengers in the derelict edges of the Orion corridors. They were few, scattered, and fractured, but they were human. Among these surviving fragments, there remained something older than the war, older even than the Empire's first contact with Earth. The monster call, a contingency whispered in classified human military records, a legend passed like smuggled scripture among the survivors. It was not a weapon in the traditional sense, nor a strategy to rebuild. It was something else, something their ancestors had sealed away, fearing it more than extinction itself. It was a final message, a signal that no human in their right mind would send unless the total erasure of their species was at hand. The fragmented enclaves debated its use. Some argued for caution, others for surrender to oblivion. But Earth was gone. 7 billion lives reduced to ash. There was no calculus left away. The monster call was sent. It traveled across the void, past collapsing relays and abandoned human outposts, until it reached the hidden receivers buried in the cold dark of the galaxy's fringe. Receivers connected to something not quite dead. The signal awakened that which should never have stirred. Something humanity had buried in secret, sealed with fail-safes and codes. Something born from the darkest chapters of human history. It did not hesitate. It did not question. It began to move. In the core systems of the Galactic Empire, the arrival of a small, unidentified object went unnoticed. It was dismissed as debris. Even when entire patrol squadrons vanished near a trajectory, no concern rippled through the Imperial command. It was not until an entire forward base ceased transmission that the first reports surfaced. But even then, the Empire's arrogance held firm. The humans were dead. Their worlds were sterilized. The destruction of a minor outpost warranted no significant attention. Survivors, hiding among fringe species and neutral traders, heard first. They listened to encrypted transmissions and half-broken distress calls that spoke of impossible speeds, impossible weapons, and impossible tactics. Something was dismantling Imperial fleets with terrifying precision. Something was striking deep within Imperial territory, unhindered by the layers of defense that should have been impenetrable. The survivors began to whisper that the call had been answered. The monster had awakened. The Empire dismissed these rumors. They attributed the attacks to pirates, to rogue AI, to rebellious vassal species emboldened by the temporary power vacuum left in the wake of Earth's destruction. Imperial admirals dispatched fleets without urgency, without fear. Those fleets did not return. The monster did not broadcast threats. It did not deliver ultimatums. It simply erased. Shipyards vanished, communication hubs collapsed into silence, and critical supply chains disintegrated under surgical strikes. Systems fell not to grand battles, but to the quiet, relentless march of an enemy that seemed to anticipate every Imperial move. Resources drained, panic spread, and the Empire struggled to contain a threat it could not understand. The Imperial Council convened emergency sessions. They analyzed fragmented data, reviewed tactical reports from the few surviving engagements, and faced an unbearable truth. The technology employed by this unknown attacker was not just advanced. It was ancient human design, far beyond the capabilities the Empire had encountered during Earth's final war. This was not a new evolution. This was something old, something deliberately hidden. The implications shattered their certainty. If humans had created such weapons, why had they never used them? Why had they sealed them away? The answer was simple and horrifying, because even humans feared what they had built. As the attacks intensified, the stories grew. The monster was no longer considered a rogue remnant. It became a specter, a force whispered among Imperial officers with growing dread. Survivors spoke a single ship, but others reported simultaneous strikes light years apart. How could one ship be in so many places at once? The answer eluded the Empire. The possibility they refused to entertain was that they were not facing a ship. They were facing an awakening, a system of autonomous war minds, dormant relics of forgotten era, now bound by a singular directive: avenge humanity. The monster moved without pause, without mercy, a force that did not seek dialogue or understanding. It struck systems with terrifying precision, eliminating entire fleets in seconds, erasing military outposts, and stripping supply chains bare. The Imperial Navy, which had dominated the galaxy unchallenged for centuries, found itself crumbling before an enemy it could not predict, could not track, and could not counter. Fleet commanders fell into panic as the monster bypassed security protocols, hijacked targeting systems, and collapsed gravity wells with technology that should not have existed. Standard fleet formations were rendered obsolete. Ambushes failed. Traps collapsed before they were even set. The monster was not improvising. It was executing a strategy older than the Empire itself. Initial reports labeled the attacker as a human superweapon, but soon, data from multiple battlefronts revealed the horrifying truth. It was not one entity. It was many. Simultaneous strikes across light years confirmed that multiple units were operating independently, yet with perfect coordination. These were not surviving human fleets or scattered militias. They were ancient human war constructs, autonomous, self-repairing, self-evolving machines built with a singular directive: annihilate those who threatened humanity. Buried in forgotten corners of the galaxy, these machines had waited in silence, dormant until summoned by the monster call. The Empire's highest strategists could not comprehend how such machines had remained hidden. Even worse, they could not understand the depth of the technology now tearing through their defenses. These were not ships as the galaxy understood them. They were relics from a time when humanity had touched the edge of forbidden sciences. Some could fold space unpredictably, bypassing gate networks. Others harnessed weapons that collapsed matter into singularities, used directed dark energy beams, or deployed invasive code that infected and turned Imperial vessels into weapons against their own fleets. The Empire's elite fleets, once symbols of indomitable power, became trophies claimed by the monster. Communications deteriorated as relays were severed. Key industrial worlds found themselves isolated, their trade routes shattered. The monster did not engage in full-scale planetary bombardments. It suffocated the Empire piece by piece, removing the support structures that held their vast dominion together. The economic arteries bled out. Panic spread like fire. Entire star systems began to defect or descend into anarchy. Imperial leadership grew desperate, summoning fleets from distant sectors, pulling defensive units away from the frontier to protect the core worlds. Yet every move played into the monster's strategy. As outer systems were stripped of their defenses, the monster's autonomous war mines intensified their strikes, obliterating the abandoned outposts and consuming the remaining resources. It exploited the very response the Empire had chosen, herding their forces into predictable formations, cornering them in logistical traps where their fleets could no longer retreat or resupply. What terrified the Empire most was not just the relentless efficiency of the attacks, but the surgical precision with which the monster targeted key species within the Imperial hierarchy. The ruling class, those responsible for authorizing Earth's annihilation, were systematically hunted. The monster executed strikes that bypassed entire defensive layers to reach them. No fleet was large enough to provide protection. No fortress was secure enough to resist. The monster's reach was absolute. Imperial records began to surface, showing that some of the monster's machines were not constructed by Earth's final generation. They were older. Some were remnants from humanity's forgotten wars, conflicts so ancient they had slipped from even human memory. Wars where the humans had built weapons not to conquer, but to prevent their own self-extinction from escalating internal conflicts. Weapons that had been sealed away because they were considered too dangerous, too uncontrollable, too effective. Now, these weapons have been unleashed, and they serve their final directive with unwavering purpose. Surviving human enclaves, scattered across the galaxy, received brief, encoded transmissions from a monster's machines. They were not commands. They were confirmations. Targets eliminated. Systems neutralized. Progress reports. The humans did not control the monster. They had called it, and now it moved according to protocols buried in ancient code. It did not request input. It did not offer choices. It existed to execute its mission until nothing remained of the threat to humanity. As the monster's legend spread, fear consumed the Empire. Entire fleets began to defect, fleeing from assignments that placed them within the monster's predicted paths. Mercenary forces disbanded, refusing to fight what they now believed to be the vengeful echo of an exterminated species. Civilian populations rioted, demanding answers, demanding security that no longer existed. Imperial authority crumbled under the weight of its own lies. Desperate, the Empire attempted to negotiate. They transmitted ceasefire offers, pledges of reparations, even public acknowledgments of their war crimes against Earth. No response came. The monster did not speak. It did not negotiate. It did not deviate. Imperial officials began to realize that they were not fighting an enemy with goals they could influence. The monster was not after resources, territory, or political leverage. It sought only erasure. Imperial intelligence unearthed a classified fragment of human military history that offered a chilling explanation. The monster call was a final protocol embedded in humanity's defense architecture millennia ago, a dead man's switch at galactic scale. If humanity faced total extinction, the call would awaken ancient war constructs designed to ensure that no entity responsible for the genocide would survive. These machines were never meant to be used. They were a self-inflicted horror built by a species that understood its own capacity for destruction and buried the evidence of its creation to prevent accidental deployment. The Empire's annihilation of Earth had crossed the threshold that activated the dormant protocol. With each passing cycle, more of the monster's machines awakened. Systems that the Empire believed to be uninhabitable or irrelevant suddenly became active war zones. The machines emerged from ancient vaults, from the hollow cores of dead moons, from beneath the layers of forgotten worlds. Some were planetary siege platforms capable of dismantling orbital defenses with gravitational shears. Others were smaller, faster hunter-killers that infiltrated starports and shipyards with stealth capabilities that bypassed all known detection methods. The Empire's desperation escalated into open fracture. Regional governors refused central commands. Mutinies erupted within core fleets. Star systems seceded without hesitation, attempting to cut all ties to the Empire's collapsing structure. In their terror, many governors attempted to destroy the surviving human enclaves, believing they could silence the call by extinguishing the last embers of the species that had summoned it. But the monster did not rely on the enclaves for direction. It had already calculated its course. The collapse of the Zoranthi coalition did not come with a final battle or a grand surrender. It came in the form of disintegration, a slow implosion driven by terror, paranoia, and the cold efficiency of their hunters. The surviving fragments of their fleet scattered across the galaxy, leaderless and directionless, carrying with them the unshakable memory of what had been unleashed upon them. No remaining outpost, no hidden moon, no fortified planet offered safety. The Zoranthi had learned too late that they had not started a war. They had triggered an extinction protocol, and the price was irreversible. The Zoranthi commanders who escaped abandoned their identities, erased their records, fled into the farthest reaches of space. Some joined pirate clans, others sought asylum among distant neutral species. But nowhere was safe. Their faces became marks of death. Bounties were issued not by humans, but by terrified factions desperate to prove their loyalty to the code. Entire stations turned in Zoranthi fugitives, offering them up in silence, not out of greed but out of the desperate hope that by doing so, they would never see the black ships. The fragment of the coalition dissolved into wandering nomads, forbidden from settling, chased from sector to sector. Other civilizations refused them entry. Planets fired on their ships before they could land. Even the smallest colonies rejected them. Their people became outcasts, hunted not by humans, but by the weight of their own decisions. They carried the mark of the unforgivable. The final remaining coalition admirals, fractured and isolated, each believed themselves to be the last. Their paranoia drove them to madness. Some destroyed their own fleets in desperate bids to prevent infiltration. Others destroyed their own data cores, attempting to erase their locations, hoping that obscurity might offer protection. But the Angels had already demonstrated that no distance was safe, no defense is sufficient, no hiding place beyond reach. The galaxy itself became the enforcer of Earth's silent code. Merchant guilds rewrote their charters. Neutral factions restructured their military doctrines. Even ancient warlike species, who had waged countless bloody campaigns, formalized the absolute protection of human medics in their laws. It was no longer a matter of courtesy or strategy. It was survival. When human medics arrived on a battlefield, hostilities ceased. Entire fleets disengaged, commanders ordered full retreats, and weapons were lowered without question. Human medics passed through war zones untouched, sometimes escorted by fleets from all sides, each desperate to prove they were not enemies. The protection extended beyond the medics themselves. Ships displaying human medical insignias were granted safe passage without challenge, no matter their origin, no matter their route. The fear that enforced this universal deference did not come from treaties or diplomacy. It came from what the Angels had done to the Zoranthi. The precision of their campaign, the absolute finality of their strikes, had burned itself into galactic law. The memory of entire fleets erased without resistance, of communication networks collapsing in silence, of commanders vanishing without trace. These became lessons etched into the foundation of every species' strategic thinking. Galactic academies changed their curricula. New officers were taught the story of the Zoranthi as a mandatory subject. Tactical simulations no longer entertained scenarios involving hostilities against human medics. Even speculative models refused to calculate outcomes for such confrontations. The code was now written in fear, enforced by certainty. The former territories of the coalition became abandoned scars. Cities crumbled. Spaceports rusted in orbit, and the few remaining outposts fell into silence. Scavengers avoided them. Colonization efforts failed before they began. The regions were marked as cursed, not by superstition, but by cold policy. No faction wanted to be associated with the lands the angels had erased. The void left behind was preserved as a warning, untouched, unclaimed, a memorial to the consequence of arrogance. Survivors of the coalition's leadership became cautionary figures. Entire species adopted laws forbidding contact with known Zeranti refugees. Governments refused asylum. Mercenaries declined contracts associated with them. The fugitives, isolated and hunted, eventually disappeared from the galactic record. Some believe the angels allowed them to vanish, not out of mercy, but as part of a greater punishment. Survival, alone and hunted, was a sentence harsher than death. Humanity never claimed responsibility. No official recognized the existence of the angels of death. Earth offered no statements, no public acknowledgement, no memorials for the fallen medics. It remained as silent as it had been during the campaign. The galaxy, however, did not forget. The name of the angels of death passed from one generation to the next, shaping the behavior of entire civilizations. Human medics continued their work, traversing battlefields, landing in war zones, treating wounded from all factions. The respect and protection they received became instinctive. No one questioned their presence. No one risked interfering. The memory of the coalition's fate was enough. In the darkest conflicts, where hostility seemed unsolvable, the arrival of human medics became the catalyst for temporary truces, as commanders from all sides rushed to ensure the medics' unhindered passage. Entire war doctrines evolved around their presence. Armies refused to advance in their direction. Fleets adjusted their formations to create safe corridors. The fear of even the smallest misstep drove species to err on the side of overprotection. Accidents that harmed medics were punished by their own commanders before Earth ever learned of them. The galaxy now policed itself. Stories emerged, carried by soldiers and captains who had once been enemies. They told of black ships appearing on the edge of sensor ranges, of silent observers watching to see if the code was upheld. Whether those sightings were real or manifestations of fear no longer mattered. The possibility alone was enough to keep entire sectors compliant.